Hey everybody, welcome back to another part in my new series, Just How Good is the Line 6 Helix, where I take the Line 6 Helix and stack it up against other very popular and well-respected modelers. Today, I am taking a look at the US Deluxe Nrm model from our Line 6 Helix and putting it up against the Strymon Iridium Round amp model. We're going to do this in a bunch of ways, just like I did in the first video, try to keep things as fair and unfair as possible, meaning we're going to listen to it and compare them through the built-in IRs in the Strymon Iridium that come with it, and we're also going to compare those to the stock cabs in the Helix. Then we're also going to run them both through the same IR to sort of isolate more in a scientific manner the difference or the potential difference between the modeling. Again, I just want to reiterate, this isn't to show whether one is necessarily better or worse. I think we live in a time now where all of these modelers just sound fantastic. What a great time to be a guitar player. The funny thing is when I did the first one, a lot of people will ask, what do you like better? Which one did you prefer? Which one? And it really depends because, I mean, these are all very tweakable, right? I could make an album or play live with any of these modelers and be perfectly happy. So I think a lot of it comes down to workflow and other features maybe that are going to make it better for your particular workflow. Maybe simplicity is something you're looking for. Maybe lack of options versus a lot of options, and so on and so forth. Everybody's different, and I never want to make it sound like I'm trying to say that I think everybody should do things one way or the other. But these are just fun little comparisons, and I think the outcome of most of these is going to be that all of these models are really fantastic. Let's go over to HXEdit and take a look and see what we have. So I've set up a pretty interesting little way to compare these. Let me run you through it. I've set up a looper at the beginning so that we can run the same performance with the same volume levels and everything matched through each different scenario so that we're getting a more accurate picture. A lot of people make the mistake of comparing, let's say, two amp models, but with using two different performances. There's going to be so many variables in the performances that could skew what we feel we prefer when listening and comparing. So by doing the looper at the beginning and listening to the exact same performance, that's going to help us to isolate, which one we actually might like better. So what I have is 6 presets. I have US Deluxe, which is number 1, which as you'll see here is the US Deluxe Nrm amp model. At the settings it just comes up with when we pull it up, with its matching cabinet, which is a 112 US Deluxe. The only thing I changed is I put a 121 ribbon mic on, one of my favorite mics, pulled it 4 inches back. I kept the low and high cuts on exactly where they are when they come up, okay? So 80 hertz on the low cut, high cut at 8 kilohertz. Now you'll notice there's a send and a return, which are deactivated, an IR, which is deactivated, a delay and a reverb, all deactivated. So all we're hearing here is the amp and cab block. When I switch to the Iridium, what I have is you'll notice the amp and cab block turn off, the IR stays off, delay and reverb stay off. I have the sending out of the Helix into the Iridium's input. Now the reason you might say, why didn't you just use a loop block? Well, I did that for a good reason, because I sent out of send number 1, which I had set to instrument, which is, you can set the Iridium to line also, I realize that, but I just wanted to go with it more like, if a guitar was plugged into it. So I set this to instrument, and then I went to return to, set it to line, because the line output of the Iridium is returning back to the Helix here. So it's just basically a little more of a complicated way to set up a loop, but for very specific reasons. And you'll notice, so when I'm on snapshot 2, it's just the Iridium, okay? Then I did US Deluxe Wet, which is back to the Helix US Deluxe with the delay and reverb at the end, just to have some fun and let's hear what it sounds like with some reverb. And I did the same thing for the Iridium. Again, okay, this time with the delay and reverb on. But then I wanted to compare apples to apples here. So what I did is I went to a US Deluxe IR, and I turned the cab off, you'll notice. I turned the effects off, I turned the Iridium off, and I went through this Own Hammer 112 Deluxe Verb CTS-C12 balanced impulse response, all right? And I kind of tried to match the levels here as best I could. And then what I'm going to do when we get there is I'm going to turn the impulse response off in the Iridium and then have it run through the same IR so that we can go back and forth and see how those sound. So what do you think? Let's take a listen first. I'm not going to play the loop yet. I'm just going to get our impressions here with these settings of the Helix US Deluxe Nrm. I am playing my Vigier Expert guitar. I have it on the neck pickup. I love this guitar. These are some of the nicest Strat tones and nicest Strat guitar I've ever played. So this is what this one sounds like. Nice, very nice tone. And that's just like I said, all I did is swap out to a 121 ribbon mic there. So let's go over to the Iridium now, and it sounds like this. Back to the Helix. Now you'll see over here on the camera, you'll see the settings that I'm using on the Iridium. It might be a little lower in level. Let's just boost that up. Helix. Now, what you'll hear right away is the Helix seems to sound a little bit brighter. Now, the thing to keep in mind is this. We are also here comparing kind of apples to oranges. We have completely different IRs on each. So is the difference we're hearing from the amp modeling or is the difference we're hearing from the IR? I would tend to believe, in my opinion, that there's far more difference because of the IR than there is from the amp modeling. And we'll see that later when we compare it with similar, or not similar, but the exact same IRs. I can just see a lot of folks saying, well, the Iridium sounds warmer and smoother sounding, and it kind of does. But again, is that because of, and I believe it's the Hammer IR that I'm on. I'm on IR number 1, which I believe is similar. Not sure exactly which microphone setups or which one it is from this pack that I own also from the Hammer folks, who make some very, very nice IRs. So that's the thing to keep in mind. So what we could do here is if I go back to the Helix version, and let's listen to our loop now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some adjustments to the Helix version of this, just using the high cuts on the stock cab, and see if we can get this sounding closer. So here's the little loop I made up. Very interesting, right? When I pulled the high cut all the way down to 3 kilohertz, and we know the cab blocks are far less dramatic dB per octave slope to them than a normal EQ block in the Helix. So that's interesting. I went all the way down to 3 kilohertz. I mean, is it exact? No, it's not exact. Is it closer? Yeah, it's closer. Which is better? Well, again, this is going to really be up to personal preference. There's things I really like about the Helix one here that I might think would sit better in maybe a dense mix. It would cut a little bit better. Whereas maybe if I was just playing by myself in a room, I kind of like what's happening on the Iridium version. But again, is this because of the amp modeling or is it because of the IR? I tend to think it's more because of the IR, which we'll see later and see how the amp modeling actually measures up when using the same IR. So that was kind of interesting. Well, let's take a listen to these now. Let's go to the little bit of reverb and delay. So this is the Helix US Deluxe. The Iridium. Back to the Helix. I love them both, actually. What both really nice tones. But again, like I said, for certain things, I would very likely gravitate toward the Helix here for a certain, maybe busier mix, something that I needed to cut a little bit more in. And again, there's obviously other controls on here. This isn't a review video seeing what all the controls do in comparison. In that way, just to sort of see the amp modeling at similar settings, right? Because if you look at the settings on the US Deluxe Nrm, I have the drive at 5, very close on, a little bit higher on the Iridium. I found the Iridium doesn't have as much overdrive when the drive is cranked as the US Deluxe on the Helix does. Bass is sort of basically right up the middle. Mid, there is no mid control in the US Deluxe Reverb, so the folks at Iridium say, you know, for the natural sound that they modeled of this amp, just put it in the middle, and I think it's the same thing for the Helix. Treble at 4.4, presence at 2.1, you know, treble is at 5 on the Iridium. And you know, again, if I come over to the Iridium and maybe crank a little more treble in there, the Helix. Again, something I'm kind of gravitating more towards in the Helix, but again, both would be great for different situations, and I really personally can't say I think one is necessarily better than the other. Okay, so here's what's going to be interesting now. What the folks at Strymon did is something very, very cool. I'm just going to put my guitar down here. If we power cycle while holding the on button, and just unplug this, hold the on button, power cycle. We'll see the LEDs flash. Now, we let that go. Now, you'll notice over here on the Fave, it's red. Now, if I turn the drive control, it goes to green, which means I'm bypassing the internal amplifier modeling of the Iridium. If I go to amber, this is bypassing the cab or the impulse response inside. And if I go to red, it's normal. So we want to bypass the impulse response. We're going to press on again. Now what's happened is we no longer have the impulse response on inside of the Iridium. And this is going to be good for what we want to do next. US Deluxe with an IR. So you see I have the amp model on, I turned the cab off, everything else is off, and we're going through this Unhammer 112 Deluxe Reverb. Balanced I chose for the selection of IR I used. And then if I switch over to the Iridium now, I've turned the cab block off in the Iridium. So you'll hear if I turn this off, okay, so there's no cab block on in the Iridium. That's it with the Unhammer IR. So let's compare this to the Helix, and let's just sort of see if we have the same kind of levels here. Go over to the Iridium. So the Iridium is a lot lower in volume. Actually, I'm going to move the drive back to where I had it. I think that got bumped when, and I'm going to put the treble back too. I'm going to give this some more volume though. So we notice again, the Helix is still a little bit brighter, but again, now if we play our loop here, again, as you notice in all my videos, watch up here in the snapshots, you'll see which one we're listening to at any given time. So as you can see, once we match the same IR and then we kind of tweak the settings a little bit, we can get this very close. Again, we get to a point where we're kind of splitting hairs, right? Is one better? I can't say that one is better. They both sound incredible, and I would be happy to use either one of these on a recording. I could make a great album with either one of these. I could play a great live show and just sort of turn them on and forget what I'm playing through and just enjoy playing them. The other thing to keep in mind is we do not know which particular US Deluxe amp, what year amp, or the age of the tubes, let's say, that the folks at Helix used to model their version versus the folks at Strymon. Was it, it obviously was different amplifiers modeled in different ways. So it's a really tough thing to say. Again, one is better or worse. It's not really what this is about anyways. It's more just about saying, how does the Helix measure up? Can it kind of hang with all these other modelers? And I say it. I mean, you guys know how I feel about it. I love the Helix. It's my go-to modeler. And I think a lot, like I mentioned in the beginning, is because of its ease of use, right? I can move around and create presets and tones, and it's so effortlessly and so quickly. And something obviously the Helix has, or the HX Stomp, is a lot more effects. The Strymon folks have always put a little bit of a room reverb in, and a lot of really nice features packed into this little box. Really, really amazing and well done. Anybody's looking for a very tiny amp modeler solution with just a few really great solid tones, you can't go wrong with the Iridium. If we want something deeper like an HX Stomp or a Helix with a lot more effects, obviously it's going to be a different thing. But here we're just talking about the core amp tones. And I really think the Helix did a great job here. In some cases, I would probably lean towards using the Helix. In other cases, I may lean towards using the Iridium. I don't know. To be honest with you, I'd probably just stick to the Helix because, as I showed, you could do a little bit of really fast tweaking and be basically almost indistinguishable in my book. So I hope you guys enjoyed that look at this. I'm really enjoying the Iridium. I've only had it for a very short period of time. That's really the first time I've plugged it in and messed around with it, but maybe I'll do a couple more videos kind of going through my thoughts about the Iridium. If anybody wants to see that, leave me a comment below and maybe I'll get around to doing that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, I appreciate your time and I appreciate you sticking with me. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would enjoy it, and subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I will be back soon with some more, hopefully enjoyable content. Thank you guys again. I'm going to have a little bit of fun here on the way out.